Good morning, everyone. It's delightful to be here with you. Good morning. Tab read some words by Henry Nouwen earlier. Henry, as was noted, was a Roman Catholic priest. What I find interesting about Nouwen's story is they left their academic role at Harvard and became a pastor at one of the L'Arche communities here in Ontario, at Richmond Hill. If you don't know, L'Arche communities are communities where people with significant developmental disabilities are integrated and live in community. That community is still going strong in Richmond Hill. And Nouwen wrote, and this is a bit of a recap, let me tell you about another experience that came out of my move. It was the experience of shared ministry. I was educated at a seminary that made me believe that ministry was essentially an individual affair. I had to be well-trained and well-formed, and after 6 years of training and formation, I was considered well-equipped to preach, administer the sacraments, counsel, and run a parish. I was made to feel like a man sent on a long, long hike with a huge backpack containing all the things necessary to help the people I would meet on the road. Questions had answers, problems had solution, and pains had their medicine. Over the years, I realized that things are not as simple as that. And the piece I'm reading concludes with these words: we cannot bring good news on our own. I have found over and over again how hard it is to be truly faithful when I'm alone. I need my siblings to pray with me, to speak with me about the spiritual task at hand, and to challenge me to stay pure in mind, heart, and body. Now, we might not use all of the language that Nouwen uses, but I'm prepared to suggest that we too need one another so that we are able to stay true to our best selves, to help one another so that no one needs to carry that big backpack alone. More frequently in my work, and was mentioned, I used to work with the Canadian Unitarian Council supporting congregations in the eastern half of the country. And over time, I've begun to hear the language of shared ministry more frequently than I did, and which I was on a little hobby horse with that language myself. But it seems to be taking off because the reality is all ministries are shared ministries. Even in congregations where there's a full-time minister, the reality is that most of the work is done by the people in the room, not by the people at the pulpit. Some congregations happen to work with a professional minister. And I think this shift to shared ministry as an understanding is important. More than ever, we are beginning to wrestle with the real tension in our congregations as well between individual and community. When I first became a UU all those years ago, I can't do the arithmetic that quickly, there was a lot of talk about what I believe. And we still hear that in our congregations, and I'm not saying that's not important. But it can be tricky work in a UU congregation when many of us are so eager, perhaps too eager at times, to define ourselves by differentiating ourselves from other religious paths or what we feel comfortable with. But we're here in a community. And I don't think that enlightenment or insight are solitary sports. We need one another. And if we didn't believe in our hearts that that was true, we wouldn't be here gathered this morning. The people online would be using their devices to watch cat videos instead of this. Or maybe the hockey game, just saying. A congregational website I came across not so long ago says this about the motivations that people have for attendance at our congregations. People come to our churches to be lifted out of the ordinary, to be drawn up from the mundane, and to seek relief from the omnipresent materialism of our culture. People come into religious community to wrestle with life's ultimate questions, looking for a place to seek meaning about living and dying and all the places in between. People are looking for a way to make a difference in the world, to live a life that matters. In our society of frequent relocations and diminished family support, people also come to congregations to find friends and community. They come for a sense of intimacy and a safe place in which they can be accepted. They come looking for a place to belong. Well, that may be why some people came. I personally joined because I wanted to serve on a committee. I've had lots of opportunities to do that. Truthfully, though, if we do it right, if we get it right, our congregations can be places where we support one another in the journey, in the work of intimacy and ultimacy. We can do it for ourselves here, but more significantly for me, we can help one another. Congregations remind us that we need to do it together. And sometimes we fall short. We have aspirations, we have covenants, and we are human. Sometimes congregations fall short and they don't deliver what people are looking for or what we said we were going to deliver. They try, we try, but sometimes we don't deliver the goods. And we find that people, sometimes after a burst of enthusiasm, slowly drift away. I think we'd be well served to be more honest about our pesky habit of being human and fallible. Some time ago, I took a course that helped me make the connection between theology and the way congregations and denominations organize. I considered that in our congregations, there is no single theological outlook. And that led me to conclude, though just briefly I will say, that perhaps we are destined to be disorganized. But then I thought about some of what was at the core, some of our values, our aspirations of equity and justice, and our focus on interdependence. And I thought that most of us could, at least with some translation, resonate with Channing's statement that there was within each human the seed of the divine. If that's true, we are not a top-down denomination. We are not a top-down people. We believe that all of us have a seed of the divine in us. So theologically speaking, if we're not top-down, then our congregations and our organizations should reflect that. They need to reflect our values. And so for us, if we're to have institutional integrity, if our values and our principles matter, we'll need to ensure that there is a place for all people. Long-term members, newer people, those who think like we do, those that don't think like we do. We need to find a space where we can be together, where people can make meaning of their lives and find deep and abiding connections, and where they are made to, at some point, Beverly, to feel uncomfortable. I think it's part of the work that we need to do. It means that we won't presume to understand, to assume that we know what the other person wants. And it means that we have to be open to the possibility of change. We need to be open to becoming different than we were the day we walked in. We'll pay attention to the wisdom and contributions of others. I have heard, maybe you have too, people say, I've been a Unitarian my whole life, I just didn't know it. I didn't know it till 5 years ago or whatever, fill in the blank. And I understand, don't get me wrong, I really do understand the point of that statement. I joke sometimes that there were early warning signs for me becoming a Unitarian in my Presbyterian Sunday school. But I don't think we can become a Unitarian or a Unitarian Universalist unless we belong to and associate with a group of people who are doing the work alongside us. It's possible to hold Unitarian and Universalist views and philosophies and to think like that without association with a community. But I believe that it's coming together in communities that reflect our collective values, in communities that help us explore our humanity, in communities that hold us accountable, where the deep and good work of truly becoming a Unitarian Universalist exists. It's in communities and congregations like this one where we do the real and important work of becoming Unitarian Universalists. James Luther Adams was a Unitarian theologian of the last century. And he said two things that I keep remembering. He said, people come to congregations seeking intimacy and ultimacy, and we've named those before. He also said, church is where we come to practice being human. We come here to have lives of meaning and to find others who can know us and see us so that we can explore fully what it means to be alive. We live in an age when no one is legally required to attend any particular church or church at all. And the choices we make about where we belong are expressions of our theology. But to do that sort of work, to make those connections, is to risk something. It's to risk being open with others. It's to risk sharing our deepest self with other people. And it's to risk having someone to say to us, I think we can do better. Being in deep community means we must be open to change. This kind of openness is not easy. It will lead us to lands where we are strange to others and others are strange to us. Congregations as gatherings of friendly people are not enough. They ought to be places where we encounter strangers, where we are at least some of the time uncomfortable. If we are personally open to change and challenge, so too our congregations must be. Because unless our structures and institutions reflect our values, things will be askew. So there it is, a challenge for us all. Our congregations need to figure out better ways, always better ways. It's not a deep criticism, but we need to find better ways to figure out how we live our theology and values and how we reflect them in our organizations so that we can minister effectively to one another and to the world. It takes ongoing effort to do this work. We need to enter into the kind of shared ministry that Nowan was talking about. For me to be authentically Unitarian Universalist, congregations need to develop and redevelop programs. Just because we did it 20 years ago doesn't mean it's the right thing to do today. Practices and outlooks that help long-time and brand-new members find a community of meaning, to make changes that help those that are underrepresented find the kind of faith community we want to be is our work. There is a pesky human tendency to resist change. Consciously or unconsciously, we try to keep things the way they are. After all, it works for the people who are here. But who's not here? Who doesn't it work for? Who would find our liberal approach to theology life-affirming? Who would find it life-affirming but are feeling less than welcome because of some of the practices and habits that we have in our congregations? I don't think any one person here or in any of the congregations that I've ever encountered wants to be inhospitable, but the reality is we all are at times. The way we've always done things may not be the way we need to be doing things anymore. Ironically, the truth is ours is a tradition that has changed a great deal over the years. 100 years ago, if you walked into any Unitarian or Universalist congregation, we weren't merged yet, so they were single entities, they were all explicitly Christian. Shifts and changes are part of our story, and they are some of the ways that we have responded to the needs of people we've not yet met. Yet in the past years, there has been resistance in some quarters to new ideas and changes. The eighth principle, while it's a good news story, was not an easy path. It was a rocky road that got us to that vote. And it has continued to be a rocky road in some places. But the reality is everything changes. Some changes we see and welcome, and others we deny and resist. Change isn't easy. It sometimes represents loss, and that's tough. But as we learned in Star Trek, and as the Borg asserts, resistance is futile. The changes are going to happen. We need to make sure our congregations can be and are ready to be open to new people, that our members are willing to risk meaningful engagement, and that each of us in each of our congregations is open to the possibility of change. And I know that's not easy. I think with amusement of my time in my home congregation of Hamilton, which was mentioned. When I first joined the Hamilton congregation, it was completely lay-led. And when the congregation started talking about maybe we should get a minister, I remember thinking, well, what do we need one of those for? And we've moved a couple of times too, and I remember thinking, but I'll miss the old building, but here we are. It's not easy for us to do this work. We feel comfortable when we're dealing with the familiar. It feels safe to have great conversations with people who think the same way we do. But if we don't change, if we don't let the comfort of the familiar lull us into assuming all is well, we may fail to be the communities that our values and our theology call us to be. Happily, maybe, I have some thoughts about what we can do in our congregations to meet this challenge. My thoughts aren't the only useful ones, of course, but I think they're a starting point for a conversation about authenticity. What do you personally do when you find your choices out of alignment with your values or hopes for yourself? I imagine many of us start this difficult work by taking a personal inventory. What is it we want from our lives and our relationships? What would it look like if I were to change or to think differently? And then if you're anything like me, you think of one or two small things you can do that will help move you in the direction that you aspire to move into, to greater alignment. I won't ever get to the place where I can say about my life that everything I do is in perfect alignment with my values. I've already established that I think we're all annoyingly human, perfectly imperfect. And it's a problem for me because sometimes I let perfection be the enemy of the good. I can't get hung up on not arriving because there's work to do today. It's easy for me to get stuck and forget to appreciate the small steps. And I see congregations struggling with this too. Well, we don't know what to do. But if authenticity and integrity are worthy goals, we'll accept our imperfections and find a place to start. If our values, reflected in our principles, include concepts such as inclusion, compassion, community, encouragement, spiritual growth, dismantling racism, and more, we've got a pretty good starting place for our conversations. How well are we collectively embodying these values is the question I think we need to start with. Something I've observed in myself and many of the congregations I've had the privilege to work with is the real tension between individual needs and preferences and that of the congregation. Your ideas for great worship might differ from mine. I might have ideas about what I think our social justice priorities should be, and you might think they're ill-advised. The ways we, with our varied understandings and preferences, can bump into one another feels limitless. But at our best, we rise above those personal preferences and think about how the community can be its best self, not how I can be comfortable. When we do this work, we remember to think about the collective welfare. It doesn't mean our personal preferences for worship or music or anything else gets completely ignored, but it does mean we ask ourselves what the group needs. I'm not talking about any one person being a pushover. That wouldn't put us in greater alignment with our values. But I am thinking about the beautiful dance that we can create when congregational life is a mix of give and take. How lovely it is when someone can say, in this moment, I'm happy to defer to someone else's preference. It's my gift to them. I think that's important. I'm happy at times to let someone else's immediate needs and preferences take the front seat. My being stretched is good for me, and it's something I can give to honor another person's spiritual path. I know here in your congregation, you are asking yourselves, as you always are, how you gather and organize. It's something that happens during ministerial transitions, and here you are now with Reverend Sally, relatively recently arrived, asking yourselves if you are as welcoming to others as you'd like to be, if your values are reflected in the work you do. Bravo, because that feels like the place we have to start. And you know, it's not always done. I had a classmate in seminary at Meadville Lombard who came from one of the many UU congregations in the Washington, D.C. area. And in class, it was a class on polity, how we organize, he told us of congregational meetings and board meetings at this particular congregation, which were characterized And he told us this completely unfazed, as though this was not a problem. He said the meetings were characterized by yelling and screaming and name-calling. The other people in the class are like, really? And he said, oh, that's just the way we do things in Washington. It's probably more true now than it was then. Congregational meetings may have reflected that Washington culture, but I don't think it was a reflection of Unitarian Universalist values. He described a congregation that wasn't functioning with authenticity, far from it. Most cases of congregational disconnect I've encountered are not as profound and as extreme as that one. But if we do the work, and if we take an honest inventory, we will understand there is work to do. And that's okay. It's not easy. At times, it's downright difficult. But then again, I think we've all figured out, based on the fact that there's no 4-year-olds here, I think we've all figured out that hard is not necessarily bad. Good work is often challenging. I love our congregations. I love our liberal communities of faith that help people find companions for the journey. I love that there are groups of people who are witnessing to one another's lives and who do it with compassion. I love that people can be brave enough to call one another when help is needed to their higher selves. I love that our congregations and their members are not afraid to look at the world and do the important work of justice making. I love that we can show the world through the choices we make about how we organize and assemble what it is we believe. And I particularly love that we do this even when it's difficult. I feel so fortunate to have found this faith tradition. I'm pretty passionate about passing it on in better shape than I found it for the next generations. I hope all of you know just how much this congregation can offer to the larger community and to the people you've not yet met. Thankfully, no one has to carry that backpack of gear alone. You can each carry a small pack. You can help one another, and you can invite others to join with you in the journey. It makes me happy to know that you're doing this work together and that you're companioning to one another, and I'm so glad to have been here with you today.